Cool, thanks everyone. I realize Greg and I are standing between you and lunch, so we'll try and keep this as brief and then try and leave some time for questions. But thanks for joining the session. So this is actually a photo in Gauteng, and I suppose this is the reality, is that we've got a very established, well-formalized modern trade. But just to the right, on your right, is very much this informal trade that's very much growing and expanding quickly, and from a sales growth point of view, almost 3 times the size on the left. So essentially what we're trying to solve is how do we get to these shoppers as the lines are sort of blurring. I'm going to take you through just a quick video, and then we'll talk through some of the points. So I suppose, it's not an age-old problem, but I suppose not a lot of people have actually cracked how to get into this market. And there are a couple guys, so Coke does it well, BAT does it well, and the bread guys probably are the third there. So I suppose it's very much how do we get into this market. And this video is, I think we've just updated it now, but essentially we've been on this journey for about 3 years now. So there's been a lot of lessons learned, and there's a lot of school fees that have been paid, but essentially, if you want to break it down, the aim of this entire thing was literally develop an end-to-end route to market solution with tech as our foundation. We wanted to make sure it was tech-based, and in order to create an ecosystem of specialist partners and ultimately bring in syndication partners, because cost to serve here is a reality. Last mile fulfillment's a real cost, and if you can syndicate the model, then obviously you give a bit of a part to everyone. But broken down to essentially, it's very much all around an order. How do we pick and pack that in a warehouse? How do we get a courier or a driver to deliver it? And then ultimately, how do you solve payment? So we're just breaking down into each of those then. So at Unilever, we've got this first to mind, first to find, and a price that's kind. So, really trying to look after our mainstream consumer and making sure our products are as affordable as possible. But to do this, we've literally had to go and employ an entire sales force that literally walks around taking orders. And we've done that because a lot of these spaza traders or owners are foreigners. So 90% we estimate are literally Somali, Bangladesh, Pakistanis. And they don't trust a lot of people. So having that rep coming and actually knowing that they're going to rock up on a certain day every single week, we've built some trust there. And then ultimately what we've tried to do is build in technology here. So the rep is taking the order in this case. We've moved to sort of e-order, so we've got about 1,500 traders placing orders themselves on an app. But essentially, we used Mac Mobile as one of our first partners to create a layer for order generation. Moving into sort of the pick-pack side, and then Greg will elaborate a lot more here, but I suppose, we needed to push the order somewhere, and it needs to be API integrated in the background. So tracking and reporting, the presentation before this, I think you've seen it over and over. End-to-end visibility is absolutely critical. And then stock management, in terms of the way we've put it, we've almost used a consignment model. And I use consignment like that because we've actually created a transshipment point in Parcelninja's warehouse where we've got full visibility into it. But essentially, obviously stock takes and stock, managing that stock is quite critical. So, when it gets to the stock counts and everything needs to balance. And Parcelninja have been really, really good at this. In terms of logistics, we've gone on a bit of a journey here. We started off with a company called OneDrop, and then obviously Massmart bought into them and essentially bought them out completely. And then what we pivoted to is very much how do we create sort of this SME black-focused owners in sort of these township areas. And we've done this, one, because it's sustainable and it's the right thing to do. But secondly, this is their neighborhood, this is their backyard. Risk is real here. We sit with hijackings, muggings, and we're trying to mitigate that as much as possible. So by having someone who's local and it's their business, you get left alone to a large degree. And then obviously trying to bring in sort of the digitization side of this. So literally we talk about end-to-end visibility, but how do we route it? How do we track it? How does it then come back into the system? And then, you can try to get away from it, but ultimately 70-80% of this market is still cash. Cash is king. So you have to have a solution for cash here, and we've partnered with Standard Bank to do that. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but there's an entire recon that happens in the background. So this reflects back into Unilever in about 48 hours. But essentially, you have to solve how you bank cash, how do you build digital capability. So we've now moved into some customers are cashless and trading on a wallet. And then, like I spoke about, that recon side is, we've got goods in transit, we've got cash in transit, you've got to have all these insurances. But essentially, there's a big recon system that happens in the background to balance this all. So really, what are the keys to success? And I'll hand over to Greg. But ultimately, it is how do you build an end-to-end system? So we kind of went and said, well, what do we want to create? And went about doing it. Bringing in the right partner is absolutely critical. So Parcelninja was one of our first partners, and they've been absolutely fantastic. But essentially, we've got Mac Mobile, we've got Parcelninja, we've got about 4 or 5 different courier companies, and then we've got Standard Bank, and then now we've brought in our first syndication partners. So Kellogg's in our model at the moment, and then Standard Bank to a degree with Thrive. But essentially, having the right partners on board literally brings us to life. So I think the thinking was, let's go and get the specialists to do each specific part and what they're good at, and we'll try and manage the entire system end to end. Technology was an absolute must in this thing. So, instead of just literally having a DC somewhere, or a warehouse, or a MIDI, or a wholesaler, we literally tried to do this by bringing in tech and API integrating into the background in terms of everybody had a tech layer. And then what we've also tried to create, and I look after new models and new business, but essentially this is one component. This can move into B2B2C, it can move into DTC. Essentially, you've created building blocks that can literally be put anywhere, and it becomes quite modular in terms of creating solutions for other models. So really the 4 critical points, and I'm going to hand over to Greg to touch into the second point a bit deeper.
Thanks. Okay, so I think maybe just to start off with sort of how we met Unilever. I remember meeting Sean in Durban, and they said to us, can you pick and pack and distribute for us into the main market? And we said, absolutely, we do it all day long. Picking and packing is simple. We pick for 70 or 80 different companies. We know how to receive orders digitally. I'm sure it's the same. And then he mentioned that there was one element that wasn't so easy, which was cash collection. At which point we said, no, I think we're not going to be able to do this for you. And he said, well, you have to, because we've tried other partners and you are the only one. So we then took on Unilever as a client, and we started in a small little warehouse in Linbro Park. Pallets were literally dropped on the floor, and it was all quite easy until it started to scale. And that's sort of where the journey started. So really, what is the challenge with this route to market? So we all understand kind of the end. That's why we're all here. Picking, packing is something that we do all day long. We all understand warehouses. But really, the key was to work out how we receive orders at scale and we have full visibility, and we deal with cash payments, and we deal with multiple partners and multiple stakeholders, all within a very compressed window of time, with a significant amount of products that you've got to handle. So we had to move 270,000 items roughly to about 15,000 shops a month, or 15,000 shops a week, but 270,000 items a month. We've got to pick them accurately because you can't have returns for incorrect product. You've got to move it into the informal market, and you've got to collect payments of multiple different methods. This is not simple, even if you naively believe so when you first hear it. So the first part, or the first real challenge, is to accept orders across multi-channels. So at Parcelninja, we do this all day. We integrate with, as I said, 70 or 80 different e-commerce retailers. So that's not such a difficult challenge. The real difficulty here is that your orders, like in e-commerce, don't arrive at the same time. You can have a spike at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You can, in worst case, have a spike at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the expectation is that you still deliver next day. And that creates quite a bit of complexity. Additionally, the markets that you're servicing are very sensitive to sort of external factors. Macro runs big promotions, or there's a strike or a service delivery protest that then affects your demand, and you never kind of know what you're going to get at any point in time. Then the other thing is to work out from a demand side, how do you make sure that these baskets that you're delivering have got enough rands or enough profit in them to make it feasible to actually get it to the market? And then the other challenge here is that you have to syndicate these baskets. So Sean mentioned to you that they've added Kellogg's into the basket. You need to create and add as much value into that basket to make the whole thing economical, because it's expensive. You've got a lot of people touching and handling this product, which drives costs up. It's not a case of moving pallets onto a truck with a forklift and touching it once or twice. Here you're breaking pallets, you're scanning, you're weighing. There's a lot of work involved. Right, so now what's important is, because you've got multiple systems, you have Unilever's ERP system, which expects to reconcile the stock. It expects to reconcile what's been delivered with invoices, with the cash. You've got multiple delivery partners that aren't very tech savvy. You've got Parcelninja's WMS system. You've got returns coming in. I think approximately about 10% of the product gets returned for many reasons. And you've got to do this at scale. So this is a big challenge, because as you can imagine, and how it works is it's a consignment model. So we don't buy the stock from Unilever. They put it in the warehouse, and every month they synchronize SAP with us. But you've got lots of moving parts, and you've got to make sure that when drivers mark stuff as delivered, the cash is in the bank, the stock is out of the warehouse, and it's reconciled into SAP and invoiced out of SAP. And that's probably one of the bigger challenges that you've got to deal with. Right, and then from the logistics side, it's all about speed. So if we get an order today at 4 o'clock, that parcel will leave Parcelninja the next day and will be at the spaza shop by 4 o'clock that following day. You have to pick accurately, because at the moment, we don't offer a partial delivery solution. So if you pick Sunlight instead of Omo, it gets rejected, and the cost of the order acquisition, the picking, the packing, the delivery, the return, all that cost gets incurred without any revenue. So there's no room for error. And then you've got to orchestrate multi-partners, because you've got 5 couriers collecting and delivering into different areas, all using the tech, reporting issues with tech, reporting, order problems, and incorrect orders. There's misrouting. So there's a whole lot of challenges you've got to get right on the distribution side, so that you don't fail on the delivery perspective. So I've alluded to kind of how we've done it, but we'll just go into a bit more detail now. So what did we do is we had to connect to omni-channel demand. So we accept demand from Mac Mobile, as Sean said, from other electronic channels. We're now looking at orders that we can accept from WhatsApp. There could potentially be phone call orders. There could be email orders. So this is evolving all the time, and we need to start working out how to take orders across multiple channels. We then have to get all these orders into our system very quickly in real time, and to be able to execute. Then we've got to manage our warehouse, and we have to manage cross stocks. Obviously, if you want to do same-day delivery, you've got to get the product much closer to the consumer. So the management and the tracking of orders between the cross stocks is another thing that you need to have visibility of and to control. And particularly, you need to make sure that you avoid any sort of misrouting, because you're dealing with courier partners that, I don't say they're not trustworthy, but they're looking often for excuses as to why they couldn't finish their work. So you really need to make sure that there are no excuses and the stuff is available and ready to be delivered. And then you are working with multiple SME couriers. These guys have literally got a van. Some of them have never used tech before, and you've got to literally get them up and running and delivering and collecting multiple payments and dealing with customers all in a very short space of time. And then multiple payment methods is the next challenge. We had to be able to accept multiple payment methods. So one is for a driver to physically accept cash, which has a whole bunch of risk associated with it. The other is how do we deal with electronic payments? And Unilever have done a lot of work with integration and wallets to try and decash. But as Sean says, I think 78% of this is still cash. So you've got to make sure that your drivers are depositing cash quickly so they don't accumulate too much cash. And of course, then there's the reconciliations at the end of the day. You've got to make sure that whatever they've delivered, they can account for from a cash perspective. And that is a complicated thing because they'll say, well, we got this cash because this one failed because the trader wasn't there. This was an incorrect dress. Parcelninja packed. That never happens, but I think it happened once in 3 years where we packed the wrong product. And all of these different reasons you've got to collect and to understand, what is the reason for those failures so you can deal with them. And then really making sure that you've got this end-to-end visibility so you can reconcile payments and stock and make sure that you drive performance. Okay, so then really dealing with multiple partnerships is quite tricky because you've got multiple tech stacks. So you've got Mac Mobile and lots of other different order channels. All that tech needs to come, all those orders need to come into a single platform. You've got the execution, which is sitting in a WMS system. You've got the drivers and all the visibility between the cross docks and the warehouses, and you've got the integration of all your payment methods. And then you've got to also be able to deal with multiple product masters. So you've got a Kellogg's product master and you have a Unilever product master, and you've got to make sure you account for all the stock in the same facility. And also you have evolving channels all the time, and your delivery vehicles could also potentially change. So your planning becomes more dynamic as well. So really just to get into just to give you guys a bit more perspective in terms of how the whole solution works. So step one really is we receive these orders into the Parcelninja system. So Parcelninja, if you think about it, almost sits like an orchestration layer across all these different partners and different requirements. So the orders really drop in here in real time. We get a customer name, we get a GPS coordinate, we get a payment method, and we get really the area where it needs to go. From then onwards, we start the pick and pack. And there, what we really do is we go into the shelves and we pick individual SKUs. So this is where the 270,000 items come from. You're dealing with shrinks and you're dealing with eachers. And each one of these totes would represent a Spaza shop delivery. There are about 1,200 deliveries that take place every single day. So you're picking 1,200 orders and double checking them every single day for the solution. And that all comes in directly from that order fill onto the guys' scanners. Then it gets picked and packed. We allocate to the different areas. Those labels get uploaded into the delivery stack, into the delivery tech, which basically then shows the drivers what they need to deliver. They do the route planning, and then they go and they do their execution of delivery. And in that same app, they actually do the payment reconciliations. So that app basically allows them to confirm what they received, whether they received cash, whether they received electronic. It tracks all the orders. They mark the orders as failed or as delivered. They provide reasons for the failure, which is really important from a recon perspective, because when a return comes in, if seals are broken and there's items missing, then the reason for the failure has to be incorrect item placed in the tote. If it's anything else, then there's stock's missing from the couriers. So there's a whole security and a whole chain of custody that needs to be managed together with the reasons we get back from the trade. And then obviously at the end of the day, there's a whole cash and payment reconciliation that has to happen every single day. And that needs to then tie in with SAP for the invoices to be generated. And ultimately the number in SAP at the end of the month needs to tie in with Parcelninja stock on the floor. And that is quite a complicated, a complicated exercise because there's so many moving parts. And then very importantly is we need all the analytics to start working out, where are we going wrong, where are we going right. And I mean, one of the key insights here, which probably shouldn't be such a surprise, but it's really a lot of the failed deliveries are as a result of traders not having enough money. So that's really two issues. One is that the Coke truck arrived an hour before and took all the cash that they had, which is the reason why you've got to get there very early. And the second one is that sometimes they just don't have enough money. So they ordered 500 rands worth of goods, but they only have 400. So the ability to accept the 400 would be a game changer. And in fact, that's one of the key drivers now to reduce returns is to start offering partial deliveries, which is complicated, and but we're pretty close to cracking it, I think. And really this just helps us with planning and helps us kind of working out the basket size and the size totes we need. And ultimately we'll start to use this to look at how we can do some network optimization. So looking at where are these cross stocks, how do we synchronize the call cycles with the delivery cycles. So there's probably a lot of optimization that could take place once this thing sort of stabilizes. So what have we achieved so far? As I say, it's been a 3-year journey, and we've moved warehouses, and we've innovated and changed, and we're now effectively servicing 15,000 shops a month. I think each of those shops gets serviced once a week, if that's correct. And we're doing it in about 13 hours on average. So that's currently happening right now. We are delivering about 270,000 shrinks a month. We have cashless payment integration, so we're able to talk to the bank now and to tell the driver whether cash has been transferred into a wallet or not, all in real time. We've employed about 370 people to date, which is really remarkable because this is really adding real value to the communities. It's solving a real problem, and it's creating employment at the same time. Sustainable employment, may I add. These people have been employed now for at least most of them probably 2 years in terms of ramp up. And when this thing scales into other provinces and we syndicate further, these numbers will just continue to grow. So this is really, really exciting. And maybe before I get into the slide, just to talk about the softer stuff in terms of what we've learned as Parcelninja and Unilever. I think one of the key successes, which isn't on the slide, is when we started in, we could call it almost a garage. It was a tiny little warehouse. We had no real idea of how this thing would scale. We had no racks. We had no forklifts. Parcelninja didn't understand the difference between an FMCG and an iPad. To us, it was picking an item. And very quickly, we learned that FMCG was fundamentally different. The infrastructure was different. The scale was different. The equipment that you used was different. You couldn't use cardboard boxes to package product. You had to come up with something that was cheaper and more sustainable. So we had to introduce returnables. You had to deal with seals on totes to make sure that there was, to deal with theft. And in the beginning, we ran this as almost like a skunk works. It was very entrepreneurial. We didn't have budgets. We just made plans all the time, and we thought and we solved, in a very kind of fast way. And when it got to the scale, that's when sort of all the corporate infrastructure kicked in, and Unilever put it into a formal structure, and they had a formal supply chain team. We had to formalize contracts, and that definitely slowed things down. But of course, at scale, you've got to have all the governance and the structures in place. So I think it's very important to start small, pilot, and give the team the ability to innovate and to test and to experiment. There was a fortune of experimentation that went into this model. And then really, what did we learn? We learned that synchronization across multiple channels is complicated but fundamental. So a lot of work went into our tech stack to make sure we could understand and aggregate all these different languages and terminologies and data into a single layer. There's a lot of rapid and agile tech development. You can't expect to build the solution and then kind of get it to work. We literally build every day as we see gaps. That's really, really important. And that in the context of kind of very low tech-savvy users is difficult. You've got to make sure that you're always thinking about the end user. We learned that at scale, there's lots of room for opportunity and optimization, and that's quite obvious. Returnable packaging and asset tracking was a massive lesson for us as Parcelninja. It's now to work at how we move that into the e-commerce space, which is a lot trickier. And then really the real cost of returns and the need for partial deliveries. I think that's sort of the last lesson or one of the other lessons we've learned. So now I'm going to leave you of my boring voice to show you a video that we did. And I think maybe just importantly, just to look at, if you can remember the first video Sean showed you, to the last video. And I don't know if you noticed, but there's stuff on the floor in the first video. It looks a bit chaotic. And that's really as we moved into our new facility. And now, kind of 3 years down the line, we've put in conveyors, we've put in better handling, and it's really a completely different story. And it's at scale now. So we're now ready kind of to expand. So let me show you the last video. Cool, so that's our presentation, and I think we've got about 9 minutes just to take any Q&A, anything related to the presentation or anything else. Sean and I, we ready to take your questions.
Yeah, geez, what a fantastic, inspirational South African story. Well done to you both. I think that's really fantastic. I think a round of applause is necessary. All right,
Thanks, Sean.
So whoever has a question, I can hand the mic to you. See, there's a lot of people. Perhaps stand up and start chatting so long.
Yeah, okay. Amazing presentation. Well done. What are the things that you need to crack? Or what are the things left to crack partial deliveries?
Do you want to go?
So I'm not sure what is the question. You say
How do you crack partial
how
deliveries?
do we crack
Yeah.
it? So it's complex because when you arrive at the spaza shop and you present the goods to the trader that he ordered yesterday, and he says to you, "Thank you, but I don't have enough money for the 2 bags of sunlight. I'd like 1." at that point in time, you've got to then go and amend the expected order so that ultimately SAP knows to expect less money and raise a lesser invoice. And then if there are failures, for example, there's returns that come in from a partial delivery, you've got to understand were those the result of a partial or a result of an error or a result of theft. So you've got to systematically work out all the systems, how they talk to each other to deal with this partial delivery. But effectively, you're amending invoices on the fly in the trade. And that's the challenge.
I think just to add, I think it's very much, it's all tech really. We need a customer to be able to sign on glass, and then for a receipt to be printed in real time with an amended invoice. So it's not impossible, but I think we're almost there. We've almost got it, but it's essentially a tech layer that we just need to build.
So you don't give the plaza owners credit lines if they're being regular. You can't extend credit lines to them as well.
Yeah, so there's absolutely something we're exploring now. So Standard Bank's one of our partners in it, and part of the partnership was very much how do we extend sort of micro lending, because as an FMCG we know there's probably about a 10 to 11% uplift in sales if you can put credit into the system. The reality is that everyone's trying to crack this algorithm in terms of how to extend credit. We're running a pilot with a smaller company now. We've got Standard Bank on board, and we've also got a Nigerian-based company that's coming to South Africa that does our e-route to market order. They've also got the partners to offer credit. We absolutely want to get into it. It's just a case of doing it, learning, but not burning ourselves too much, because there's quite a few guys who've burnt their fingers here. So we've got to be smart, but definitely on the agenda. Yeah.
And logistics makes it a lot easier if there's credit, because you can do a lot more drops now. You don't have to collect cash. So credit is the way to go.
No, absolutely.
So you put pressure.
There's a question at the back there.
Guys, thank you. Here we go.
Oh, there we go.
Great story. I'd like to understand, maybe on the routing, or to make sure of effective routing, how did you, or you're still overcoming address challenges?
Yeah, so GPS basically. So, another complication on that is that if you even get to the right address, the person who placed the order is not the person now standing behind the spaza. So, there's still a lot of shopping these guys still need to do. So we've essentially removed one journey out the equation. So they shop between 3-4 times a week, but they still need to go to wholesaler to go buy maize, sugar, oil, flour, etc. So I think the first thing is that we GPS plotted everything, and then it's a case of trial and error. So I mean, we had quite a bit of, geez, we can't find the store, or they have to now phone the rep, and the rep then knows where to then direct them to. So there was a lot of back and forth between sort of the courier team and the sales team, and a lot of the time the sales team would actually just jump in the vehicle with them and then take them around. Once they knew where it was, then it was obviously then it was a lot easier. But GPS plotted everything. So I sit with a database of around 100,000 stores across the country. What I didn't mention earlier is that this is only in Gauteng right now. So we've got 15,000 stores just in Gauteng, which is, I think, a good achievement in Gauteng, but the reality is we need to scale this thing. It needs to go a bit broader.
Guys, you're absolutely inspiring. You broke through so many barriers, to get this. So it's just so good to see that you guys just never gave up. Just a question on the cash thing. It just fascinates me. Just that you don't have so much challenges with cash and not coming back, and guys getting hijacked. And I mean, it's such a, given the climate, especially Gauteng, and yet it obviously works. 78% you said of cash. Just how does that work? I mean, and what is your loss rate on cash? Or you got it tagged?
Yeah, so look, the reality is you have to have a solution for cash. I wish it wasn't the case, because literally we do have, in the beginning we had quite a few muggings. I sat with probably a hijacking once a week at one stage. And it is a reality. Yeah, so credit is one part of decaching the system. I think we're chatting to the telcos in the background as well. So how do we start creating data that's cheaper, or sort of reverse billing, etc.? So how do we get these guys into wallets? Shop to shop, I don't know if anyone knows, shop to shop's come a long way in terms of creating cash points. So I suppose it's all around mitigation to a point, and then hopefully we become like Kenya at some point, where an M-Pesa or something kicks in, and there's just a landslide in terms of there's adoption. So I don't think we're far away. We've been talking about it for 2-3 years now, and we've always been saying it's coming, but some point it will take off. I just don't know when that is going to be. But the reality is you need a cash solution now. If you can do both, great. And if we can push cashless through credit, through mitigation, then that's the route we'll go. Yeah.
I think maybe also just to add to Sean, one of the lessons we learned in the early days, so what changed between the early days and now, is not that there's less crime. What was key was to make sure that the partners that we use are from the area.
Yeah.
And Sean will tell you, when we switched partners, because we've had lots of different providers for last mile. And for me, at least my understanding is that the partner and the area, that combination is critical when it comes to dealing with hijackings.
So we adopted the same thing with our sales team as well. So we employed our sales rep from that community because it was their home ground, so they knew the people around them. We did the same thing with our couriers, so guys that literally are in there and yeah.
And now we're down significantly, I think.
Yeah. It has reduced a lot. It's still not where we want it, but yeah. So sorry, there's a question that's been waiting for.
It's on. I was just interested, you're using a lot of external people as your actual courier. How do you plan that they know they need to come to the warehouse to collect? And then are you doing any route optimization, or is it just they arrive and sometimes there's an order or there isn't?
So how it works is, in our e-commerce business, we do the same thing. Once we pack the orders, we submit those labels electronically into the courier's basically handheld. And then what they do is they organize themselves into different areas. So these guys will collect from that cross stock, these will collect from that cross stock. But they know by, let's say, 8 o'clock at night, exactly what orders need to be executed tomorrow. And we leave it up to them to work out who does what. And in terms of the route planning, it's not actually complicated because the rep physically walks the routes. So they just follow the orders, they sequence the orders in accordance with the rep. So it's not as sophisticated as I guess you would do in the more formal trade. So
I think is there room for optimization? Absolutely. So I think we've done it on the sales side where we've got an optimized route. Can you link that into the delivery side? Absolutely. So there will be parts where maybe that trade is closed and then it will reroute them to the next closest or whatever. I think that's just the evolving process. So yeah.
But it's also fairly static. I think if you look at the numbers, they don't, within the day they fluctuate a lot, but the actual customers order pretty repeatedly. So it's not like you're dealing with a new scenario every day.
So I like the socio-economic impact that this is having, but are we measuring that impact, and are we talking about it and capturing the real story here around how you are actually empowering the locals, and is there more that you could do to actually develop the locals?
So absolutely. So I don't know if everyone heard the question, but sort of how are we making our model sustainable to an empowerment sort of situation? So I think a drastic change was, not from the beginning we've employed locally. So we made a choice to employ a sales rep from their local community. And then what we've done is we've pushed them through the system. So, Smollens is our sales, arm. We've got 4,500 heads in there, and we employed 350 people in the beginning, and we've now pushed them through. So we're bringing new people through the system. The second part of this was bringing in the driver side. So really, how do we, upskill and ask, how do they know where to go? There's a lot of lessons and there's a lot of teaching, but it's absolutely the right thing to do. The next step is that Unilever's got a supply development fund. It's about 80 million rand sitting right there now. The next step of this is when we scale, how do we create DCs that are run by Black-owned entrepreneurs? And I suppose that'll be the challenge now. So how do we get, because like I said, I've got a database of over 100,000 spazas. The reality is there's probably about 180 in the country. I mean, no one really knows the number. But if we're going to scale this thing and we're going to be relevant, we're going to have sort of micro DCs across the country. And then that's where the supply development.
And then you're deploying tech into every single DC. You're hiring DC, people that run the DC. So there's a huge amount. And I mean, even within our facility, because of the scale, we've hired, let's say, 50 people in our DC. We've had a huge amount of upward mobility in our organization, which has really helped kind of really grow our business in terms of our culture and our team.
So we're out of time. Do you want one more question or?
One more question this side. Yeah. Hi. Guys, well done. It looks great. In terms of that, obviously you guys are looking for scale. You mentioned you want to syndicate with. What's the next step? How do we actually join the party?
So just give me a shout. Literally, I've got a team that runs this. I look after a few different models, but I've got a team dedicated to this. And it is literally just give me a shout. We'll have a chat. We're looking at, so I suppose there's two major things. Is one, it's got to be non-competing to Unilever. Otherwise, there's no point in going and doing this. We might get into competing at a later stage. But secondly, is that sort of product relevant for the basket? Because to go and try to sell something into someone who's very cash strapped, I want to say you're almost wasting your time. But there is a space for innovation. There is space for new products. But if it's in their consideration set right now, then it's you're a lot further down the road. But literally just give me a shout and we can then set up sort of next steps. We can talk you through the model, bring you into all the different partners that we've put into it, and then literally put you into the warehouse and off we go. So we've just put Kellogg's in now. They've been in there for about 3 months. And we had a review last week. It's not going quite as well as we anticipated, but it's still shot the lights out from their side. So it shows that there's definite relevance, and syndication just shares the whole solution with everyone, right?
And it adds very little cost to the model, actually. It adds minimal costs and lots of upside.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's no more time for questions. I suggest that you contact these two gentlemen on LinkedIn or through the app. I'm sure they'll spend more time with you if you ask them nicely. Just on my behalf, I think it's been really inspirational. Well done to you both. I think you've chosen a great partner from a Unilever point of view and very entrepreneurial. So well done. Maybe another round of applause.
Cool, thank you.